Peace to all my we the people in the house. How y'all doing out there today? Peace. This is another public announcement. And this is a public announcement that you want to tune into. Why? Because you see the topic, my people, lost or erased. The peoples or the nationalities or the culture or the nations. Now, my people, why in the world would somebody want to even erase a certain people to not be ever heard of ever again? Well, we're going to really get into it today because we're going to get into why people call themselves Murs and Moors. But not everybody's a Mur or a Moor or Arab or Islamic. But we're going to get into where those cultures stem from. Well, you know, this is coming from my research. We are digging deep into the archives, and I never meant to look at it into this. I really never meant to look into this, but it started with a simple genealogy project, my people, the kind the millions of people do every year. You know, those genealogies that you start to trace in your family tree, searching old records, finding ancestors, normal stuff, my people. You know, we all do it. But somewhere between the census data and the immigration papers, I found something that didn't fit. Yes, we found something that didn't fit. A team of us. A pattern, my people, that did not fit. Not in one family line, but in dozens, hundreds, maybe hundreds of family lines. And the deeper I looked, my people, the less sense any of it made. For real. Names change, not gradually, not through marriage or natural linguistic drift, but suddenly, completely within a single generation, my people. Sometimes within a single year, and entire family identities were rewritten. Yes, they were rewritten. The official explanation: immigration, assimilation, clerical errors. You know, that's what they always tell us. But what if it wasn't that simple, my people, and it's not? You know, these were random changes. They weren't random changes at all, but coordinated erasures. They were erased, lost. Deliberate acts designed to serve the entire populations from a heritage, to sever them from the heritage, my people, to disconnect people from the heritage, populations from their own heritages. They were never supposed to remember. They hid a lot of heritages from us so that we could never remember. Now, I'm going to show you what I found with my research, people. In the United States between roughly 1880 and 1920, okay? And it gets deeper than this. Immigration records show something particular, my people. Families arriving from Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and parts of Russia came with one set of names, complex surnames with unusual suffixes and linguistic structures that didn't match the regions they claimed to be from. Then, within the months that I was researching, sometimes within the weeks of processing through Ellis Island or other ports of entry, those names change, not shortened, my people, not anglicized, my people, in the typical way we understand. They were replaced, okay? Replaced. Names were deliberately replaced. A man named Tartikov, Tartikov, becomes Thompson. A woman named Tartarescu becomes Taylor. Children with the surname Tartarion are registered in school records as Turner, Travis, or Thomas. And this happens not to one family, but to thousands across multiple entry points across decades from the research. The official narrative tells us this was voluntary, that immigrants chose to adopt new names to fit in, to avoid discrimination, to start a fresh new life in this new world, my people. And sure, that happened. Plenty of documentation supports it. But this was not different, my people, because the pattern repeats with unsettling precision. For those unfamiliar with the Tartarian theory, here's the foundation, my people. Researchers claim there was an advanced civilization. Call it Tartaria, call it what you want. Call it the old world that existed until relatively recently. We're not talking ancient history. We're talking the 1800s now, my people. This civilization supposedly left behind architectural evidence that official history struggles to explain. Elaborate structures, consistent designs, principles, advanced engineering, and they appear everywhere. San Francisco, St. Petersburg, Melbourne, Buenosarees, Kolkata. We could go on with it. Buildings that share the same architectural language, the same level of sophistication, the same curious detail. First floors buried underground, windows half submerged, as if someone catastrophic event, a mud flood covered the original ground levels. The mainstream explanation: different architects, different eras, convergent design trends. But here's what really made me connect with the architecture, my people. The name changes, the timing. The same period when families were erasing the Tartarian surnames, roughly 1870 to 1920, coincides almost exactly with when those magnificent buildings started being attributed to local architects with conveniently complete paper trails. When World's Fair subtly showcased technologies that seemed to appear from nowhere only to vanish just as quickly. When old maps stopped mentioning Tartaria as a place, the buildings remain. The mud flood evidence remains. The architectural mysteries remain. But the people who might have built them, their names were changed. And that's not a coincidence, my people. It can't be, because the names were erased. Erase the builders, erase the history. Now you can never trace your history. If you erase the family lines, you erase the knowledge of who actually created these structures. That's what went down, my people. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision. Wherever you find the Tartarian architectural evidence, you find genealogical erasures in the same approximate time frame, same phenomenon, same location, same systematic silence. If you think this was just an American phenomenon, look at Europe. In the 1890s, the early 1900s, census records across France, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and the Russian Empire show similar discontinuities. And all those empires were right here, not across no sea. They were right here. Families with surnames rooted in what researchers describe as Tartar or Tartarian linguistic origins suddenly vanished from administrative records, not because they died, not because they moved. They simply became other people. Other people. Okay? The Tartakovs of Moscow appear in the 1880 census. By 1897, they're the Terasovs. Their name changed, my people. Okay, from Tartacovs, they changed their last surname to Terasovs. Different name. Same address, same profession. No explanation in the records. In Prussia, a family named Tottenberg appears in property records for 3 generations, 1820, 1815, 1870. Hi, everybody in the chat. We going over genealogy right now and how they stole surnames and last names. Then in 1891, the property is listed under the name T-A-N Tannenberg. Tannenenburgg. Same parcel, same family structure. The transition documentation missing. This raises a simple but critical question. Why would families with established names, property rights, and social standing voluntarily erase their identities across multiple countries, all within the same narrow time window, all without proper documentation, and all while pretending nothing had changed? The deeper I went, the more I found with the research, my people. Now, France, Italy, Spain, Poland, Romania, which was all right here, not across any sea. Okay, everything was here before lands got separated and seas got separated and tectonic shifts started to move. The pattern repeats. If you're finding this research valuable, my people, like, share, and subscribe. Okay? Because it takes time to do this research. Now, everything was kept. These were all forgotten histories from staying buried. So they buried the history. And here's where it gets stranger, my people. In China and Mongolia during the Lateng dynasty, administrative reforms between 1880 and 1910 included widespread standardization of family names. Official records describe this as modernization, a way to streamline census data and taxation. But the specifics tell a different story, my people. Families in regions historically associated with Tatar populations, Inner Mongolia, Manchuria, parts of Xinjiang, saw their ancestral surnames replaced with Han Chinese equivalents, not transliterated, replaced, and the old names erased from official records. In Japan, during the Meiji restoration, similar reforms took place. The surname edicts of 1875 required all citizens to adopt formal family names. But what's rarely discussed is how many existing names, particularly those with connections to the INU or Northern Tatar influenced regions, were quietly eliminated from registries and replaced with approved alternatives. So they had to change the names to steal the land. Why? Why the urgency? Why the coordination? Why the silence? Because they were stealing land back then, how they are stealing the land today, my people. The Ottoman Empire presents perhaps the most glaring anomaly. For centuries, the Ottoman administration systems maintained detailed population records, tax registries, military conscription lists, property deeds. These documents are remarkably comprehensive, except for one thing. Between approximately 1870 and 1920, records of families with Tatar or Tartarian surnames became increasingly sparse, not absent, sparse. And when they do appear, they often noted as having adopted new surnames under various reform edicts. The old names simply stop appearing. But here's the thing, my people, the Ottoman Empire was multilingual, multi-ethnic, and relatively tolerant of diverse naming conventions. Greeks kept Greek names. Armenians kept Armenian names. Slaves, Arabs, Kurds all maintained their linguistic and family identities. So this is when you are going to see the rise of the Moors and the Moors and Islamics and Africans, which have always been here before Tartaria, before the Russians, before all those people. Okay, so why did Tartar names need to disappear? The official explanation collapses here. If assimilation and modernization were the goals, why target this specific ethnic linguistic group so systematically while leaving others intact? Once you see it, you can't unsee it. We're talking about a phenomenon that spans multiple continents, dozens of countries, and vastly different political systems, monarchies, empires, emerging democracies, colonial administrations, and yet within the same approximate time frame, all of these systems implemented similar policies that resulted in the same outcome. The systematic erasure of Tartar and Tartarian surnames from official records. No international treaty mandated this. There was not a treaty to remove records. There was not a treaty at that time, so they were able to do anything that they wanted to do. No single power controlled all these territories simultaneously, and yet it happened everywhere, all at once. This is the coordination problem. How does something like this occur without central organization, without documentation, without anyone anywhere questioning why entire family lineages were being rewritten? The evidence suggests something much larger than bureaucratic coincidence or organic cultural change. If this research is making you question what we've been told, you're not alone. Because the deeper that I research, my people, you can leave a comment in the chat. I read everyone and your insights when you leave it in the chat, my people. Now, perhaps the most haunting aspect of this entire phenomenon is the silence when other ethnic groups faced persecution or forced assimilation. There were protests, uprisings, documentation of resistance, letters, diaries, newspaper articles, some record of people saying this is wrong. And it's the same thing that's going on today. This is happening to us. But for the Tartaria and name changes, nothing. No documented resistance, no recorded protests, no family letters saying that the authorities forced us to change our name. No newspaper articles decrying the erasure of cultural heritages. The silence was deafening, my people, and that silence raises more questions than any answer could resolve. Were the people being threatened into compliance? Were the changes so normalized, so embedded in the bureaucratic routine that no one thought to resist? Or is the documentation, my people, simply missing, removed, destroyed, burned, or hidden in the archives? We haven't assessed this yet, my people. We don't know. And that's where the official narrative becomes impossible to ignore. Not because of what it explains, but because of what it refuses to address. If you search for academic studies on this phenomenon, you'll find almost nothing. Not much, my people, almost nothing. There are papers on immigration and name changes, studies on assimilation, linguistic analyses of surname evolution, all valid, all well researched. But on this specific pattern, the coordination, erasure of Tartar and Tartarian surnames across multiple continents within a specific time window, silence. A few scattered references, a footnote here, a passing mention there, but no comprehensive study, no historian asking, why did this happen? No sociologist examining the scale and the coordination, no genealogist mapping the systematic nature of the erasures. It's as if the academic community collectively decided this wasn't worth investigating or couldn't investigate or was subtly discouraged from investigating. Or maybe they were just fucking killed the fuck off. The deeper I went into, the more the doors closed. The archival material suddenly unavailable. We don't have this here in this library. Shit like that, they would say. Records lost in fires, entire genealogical databases with inexplicable gaps in exactly the years of the regions where these name changes occurred, my people. Not everywhere, not all the time, but enough. Enough to notice, enough to wonder. Names aren't just labels. They're markers of origin, carriers of history, links to ancestral lands and forgotten peoples, all erased. When you change a name, you don't just alter a word, you sever it. You sever the connections, my people. You cut the ties. You make it harder for descendants to trace their lineage. You erase linguistic clues that might point to different history, that the one officially recorded. And if you do this systematically across generations, across continents, you can effectively erase an entire heritage from collective memory. Within 3 generations, no one remembers the old names. Within 5, no one knows to look for them. Within 7, the very ideal that there was something to look for seems absurd. Is that what happened, my people? Yes. Did an entire culture identity get systematically dismantled through something as simple as name changes? Yes. And if so, why? We know why. They were stealing land. They were stealing the gold. They were stealing the silver. They were stealing houses, castles, everything. They were stealing. What were they hiding? What heritage was so dangerous that it needed to be erased, not through violence or conquest, but through paperwork and bureaucracy? Some traces remain in remote villages across Siberia, Mongolia, and Central Asia. You can still find elderly people with surnames that carry the old linguistic markers: Tartacov, Tataski, Tatarescu. Names that, according to the official histories, shouldn't exist or should have naturally evolved into something else by now, but they didn't. They persisted in isolating pockets, my people, in places where bureaucratic reach was limited, where the reforms didn't fully penetrate, where families held on to their names despite pressure to change their names. And when the talk to these people or read the few ethnographic studies that document their stories, a common thread emerges. Their grandparents or great-grandparents spoke of a time when everyone had these names, when Tartar surnames were common, unremarkable, normal. Then something changed. Authorities came, papers were issued, names were recorded differently, and slowly, quietly, the old names faded. So the conquerors took the people's names of the land and then changed their names to the conquerors' names, because the conquerors didn't have anything. They were paupers, but they conquered a people and stole their identity. That is what they're doing today. Okay, not by force, not through violence, through administrative, through paperwork, through simple bureaucratic acts of writing a different name into a book ledger, into a ledger. And here's the strangest part, my people. No one seemed to think it was worth mentioning. You might be wondering, what does any of this have to do with architecture, with the grand buildings and advanced infrastructure that other researchers associate with Tartarian theories? everything. Because if you erase the names, you erase the builders. If there's no record of the people with the territory and heritage, then those people couldn't have built anything. They couldn't have possessed advanced knowledge. They couldn't have a part of a sophisticated civilization. They simply didn't exist. Lies. And without the names, without the genealogical paper trail, there's no way to connect Martin descendants to whatever came before. No way to claim inheritance, literally or culturally. No way to say, my ancestors built that. The architectural mystery and the genealogical erasure may be two sides of the same coin. Erase the names and you erase the claim. Erase the names and you erase the claim to the structures. Erase the family lines and you erase the knowledge those families might have carried. It's elegant in a horrifying sort of way. You don't need to destroy buildings. You just need to ensure that no one alive can prove their ancestors built the buildings. The more I researched, my people, the more I realized this wasn't just names. It was about memory. Erase the name, erase the memory. But we have an Akashic record in our pineal gland and pituitary gland in our brain, and it allows us to remember. We have memory. Tap into your Akashic records. Cultural memory is in your Akashic records. Ancestral memory is in your Akashic records. Collective memory is in your Akashic records. All of it systematically was severed through a process that on the surface looked perfectly reasonable. Immigration, modernization, administration, efficiency, but strip away the justifications and you're left with an uncomfortable reality. Entire populations were disconnected from their heritage within living memory, and no one seemed to notice or care. That is crazy, my people. Now, how does something that massive happen without mass awareness? The answer, I think, is that it was normalized, bureaucratized, okay? Bureaucratized, turned into routine. Bureaucracy, my people. Each individual case seemed reasonable in isolation. A name change here, a clerical adjustment there, nothing sinister, nothing worth questioning. But when you step back and look at the aggregate, it's staggering. So what actually happened, my people? No one really knows because no one was there, but you can tap into your Akashic records. No one does and no one knows. There's no definitive answers. That's the point, my people. But I can tell you what the evidence suggests. Between roughly 1870 and 1920, there was a coordinated global effort to erase Tartar and Tartarian surnames from official records. Siberia, Iberia, China, all of that. This effort spanned multiple continents, involved dozens of countries with vastly different political systems, and occurred with almost no documentation, resistance, or public acknowledgement. Why? What were they hiding? What heritage was so dangerous it needed to be systematically erased? Not thorough, no violence, but through bureaucracy. Was there a global directive that we don't know about? Yes, there was, my people. An unspoken agreement among world powers to rewrite certain genealogies? Yes. Or was there something even stranger? A kind of cultural self era where the descendants of Tartaria themselves chose to forget. Or maybe they went to sleep. And if so, what did they know that we don't know? Well, maybe there was a spell of sleep in the air and everybody fell asleep and forgot. Names carry stories, my people. Lineage preserve knowledge. When you erase both, what else disappears with them? Building techniques, organizational structures, historical events that don't fit. That approved narrative we'll never know because the people who might have passed the knowledge down were systematically disconnected from their past. Their children were given new names, new origins, new stories, and within a few generations, the old knowledge simply vanished, not destroyed, not forgotten. There's a difference, and that difference haunts me because somewhere in dusty archives that I was in and forgotten documents, the truth might still exist, from which I found the original names, the family records, the connections between modern populations and whatever came before, but finding it, proving it, that's the challenge. And maybe that's exactly how it was designed to work, my people. And I started this investigation looking for my ancestors. What I found was a void, a carefully constructed, bureaucratically maintained void where an entire heritage used to be. And I can't stop asking why go to such lengths? Why coordinate such a massive effort across so many countries? Why erase these names and not others? What were they so afraid of us discovering? Of who we are, the magnificence of who we are, our greatness, our powers. We can fly. The official history offers no answers, my people. Only silence, only gaps, only the persistent, maddening refusal to acknowledge that something happened, something big enough, important enough, threatening enough, that it required a global effort to erase. And that's what keeps me digging. I'm still digging, my people, not because I have answers, but because the questions won't let me go. Because once you see the pattern, once you notice the coordinated erasures and the impossible coincidences and the deafening silence, you can't unsee it. And you can't stop wondering what we lost. You know what I'm saying, my people? What did we lose? We lost ourselves. We lost our true heritage. We lost our natural nappy hair, our natural course, our natural genealogical structure. We lost our everything within our own code. There was a code on every land, a code in every culture, a code in every seed, and every gene. There's a code. And the code is always rewritten every time a woman gives birth to a new seed. A code is rewritten, my people. And that is what you must understand, is that when the code is constantly rewritten, and only women can rewrite the code. Males can give a seed, but women hold the seed and we write the code. Okay, my people, now, if we go into this even deeper, this is where the MERS, MEURS, and the Moors start to appear, and why they choose that lineage, because that's what they choose. You can choose whatever lineage that you want to be. So, basically, in North Africa, some people identify as Moorish to connect with the legacy of Al-Andalus, Andalus, Al-Andalus, the medieval Islamic Golden Age in Spain, the dynasties like Al-Moravid dynasty and Al-Mohad dynasty. In this sense, Moorish equals cultural heritage tied to North African Muslim civilization. It reflects architecture, science, scholarship, trade, political power, and medieval Iberia. So, this came way before Tartaria. Okay, so all these people were here before Tartaria. Indigenous identity, the AMAZIGH. Some North Africans connect Moorish identity to pre colonial roots, especially in reaction to European colonization, French and Spanish rule in North Africa, erasure of AMAZIGH, Berber language and identity. In this context, it's about reclaiming ancestral heritage. Moorish identity in the United States. In the US, in the U.S. Moorish identity has a different history. In the early 1900s, movements like the Moorish Science Temple of America, founded by Noble Drew Ali, encouraged Black Americans to identify as Moorish rather than Negro or Black. Why? Because during that era, racial identity was tied to legal status and oppression. Moorish was framed as a noble pre slavery nationality. The goal was cultural uplift, spiritual identity, reclaiming dignity, rejecting imposed racial labels. Legal sovereign identity claims. Some Martin groups believe identifying as Moorish changes their legal status. These ideals often involve claims of indigenous sovereignty, rejection of U.S. citizenship, alternative nationality concepts. However, U.S. courts do not recognize Moorish identity as separate legal nationality. That distinction is important. Psychological and identity reclamation. For some, Moorish identity represents a break from slavery based identity narratives, reconnection with African and Islamic history, pride in pre colonial civilizations. It can be a form of cultural healing. Why it appeals to some people? Because Moorish history includes advanced architecture like Alhambra, 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 scientific and mathematical contributions, major influence in medieval Europe, a global trade network. It symbolizes power, scholarship, sovereignty, civilization. Important classification. There are three separate things often blended together: historical Moors, North African Muslims in Iberia, religious movements in the U.S. Sovereign legal identity claims. They are not historical the same, even though they use the same word. Now, my people, I gave you a good little history lesson here about why the changing of the names to hide superior cultures such as Moors and other cultures that were not Moorish, Africans, and then other cultures that were not African, because everybody has a right to choose their own nationality. Even if you're born from your own family, You can change your nationality if you don't like your family's nationality. It's up to you. You have a choice. You have a choice because this is the game of life. It's not checkers, it's not chess. It's a game and it's life. Life is a game to play how the player, the person, the peoples, the indigenous cultures want to play it. But we all must get along. So, on that note, my people, 407 300 5377. This has been another public announcement from the United States private enterprise free state. Stay up, stay one, stay strong. And I forgot to tell you, my people, go check out that movie, Playing in My Face. It's on Tubi by Aisha Brown. Yours truly is in it, Sister Flame. I'm in that first scene, playing a stripper. Okay. Go check the movie out, y'all. It's on Tubi, Playing in My Face. I've also produced the soundtrack on it, Sister Flame. 407 300 5377. This is another public announcement from the United States private enterprise free state. We are out.